assertiveness is really a learned verbal and nonverbal skill. It's not instinct. Passive and aggressive are fight and flight. They're instinctive in us. And so it's easy to quickly go to one of those approaches when in reality, at least as a starting point, there's probably a better way.
Welcome to the Lara Jane Layton Show. This podcast is for you, the person who keeps putting others first. Your self-talk has held you back. You no longer need to take a second seat. Let's explore ways to overcome self-doubt. You can silence that inner bully voice and achieve your full potential. Here's your host, Lara Jane.
Welcome to the show, friend. My new best friend is here with me today. Her name's Amy. And we've been talking about all these things we can do at the office, all these things we can make ourselves better. We haven't really touched a lot on communication. And so today we're going to talk about communication and in the effect of how to be authoritative, how to feel and communicate things across, but not getting that bitchy assertive side, that you must do this or you shall die kind of, where people don't want to listen to you. When we start demanding, nobody wants to help. So how do we be assertive and confident and get things done? So Amy's going to help us with that. And her information is in the show notes, so you can jump down there, get it. But Amy, help me to be assertive, yet not crossing that line as bossy.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. And I would love to help you do that, my new friend. I think it all begins with truly understanding what it means to be assertive. A lot of times you get messages when, like you said, bitchy assertive. The true definition to me of assertive is the things that we do that find the balance between getting along and getting things done. And so if you don't have that balance and you were all about getting things done, that's probably where you get a little bitchy. So you're, really direct or maybe overly aggressive along the way. And if you kind of tip to the other direction where you are all about, I don't want to hurt people's feelings. I don't want to get them upset. I don't want them to think bad things about me. Then you tend to tip to that, I'm getting along, everybody loves me, but things aren't getting done because I'm not saying the things that need to be said. So assertiveness is saying the things that need to be said, but saying it in a way that it is palatable and respectful of the other person. You can get that same message across that you could portray to somebody in a very aggressive way by just taking a step back and thinking about the language that you choose or thinking about your body language that goes along with that. And I think part of the dilemma is we learn these skills in early childhood. I use a sandbox as an example of that. So when you were little and you were playing in a sandbox with some other children, your parents sent one of a couple of messages. So let's say you're playing with your sand toy and another child comes over and takes that sand toy from you. There's one type of parenting that says, oh, don't make a big deal. It's okay. He's littler than you or she's littler than you. Just let them have it. And guess what kind of person that turns us into if that's the message that we receive? Give up, let other people have their way, never stand up for yourself. You're going to lean towards that more passive approach to communicating. And not that that we haven't learned anything since we were 5 years old, but you'll tend to go forward and use that same approach because that's how you were taught to get along and get things done. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the parent who says, hey, that's yours. You go over there and take that back. And that tends to create a more of an aggressive approach to dealing with other people. The problem is that assertiveness is really a learned verbal and nonverbal skill. It's not instinct. Passive and aggressive are fight and flight. They're instinctive in us. And so it's easy to quickly go to one of those approaches when in reality, at least as a starting point, there's probably a better way. It's just that when we reach into our toolbox of communication tools, there are no assertive tools in there. So you go with one or the other that was instinctual and reinforced by your experiences in life.
That's a good point. And the real assertive person was that kid that took the toy in the first place without asking.
Yeah.
And what did his parents say? So it's like, how do we learn that balance of asking. And then, like, hey, that was my toy. I brought it, or I had borrowed that, or I checked it out. There's all these different ways you get a toy, but
Right.
how do you take back the control of the toy and not be assertive? Well, excessively assertive.
Right. Well, and I think that is a misconception that there is such a thing as excessively assertive. The example of and it's a good point. That kid's getting what he wants by taking that toy. What that child is doing is that child is being aggressive. I think we don't realize that aggressive doesn't mean I went over and punched you in the face first before I took the toy from you. It is the fact that I took it without any conversation, without any interaction, without any, here's what I need. I would really love the opportunity to play with that toy, but I see that you're already playing with it. What's your status? Like, can you play with it 5 more minutes and then can I have it? Like, it's a conversation, and that's the skill that comes into play, that communication skill that comes into play. And I'll be perfectly honest. I didn't learn that skill until I was in graduate school, and a light bulb went off. I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a better way, because I was the kid that was stealing your toy.
Oh,
And
man.
I was the I was the aggressive kid. And if aggression didn't work, I would try a little passive aggression, and that's another technique that kind of falls between the lines there. And so I realized that once I understood what assertiveness is and how to have that type of expression of my own needs while inquiring and truly caring about the other person's needs, that I can really find a solution that gets along and gets things done, that meets both of our needs, if we can do that. And I'm not saying in life, when you're out there and you're trying to have rational conversations with people, that they're always going to play the game, because they don't. There's going to be that kid that's going to say, I don't care. Or that adult that's like, I don't care if you were already in the line at the grocery store. I'm getting in front of you because I've got fewer things. I mean, you're gonna still run into those people, but by acquiring those assertive communication tools and adding those to your toolbox, it gives you options that you can put those into play. And I personally have experienced the power, even if I haven't used them, even if I let that person cut me in line at the store, or I let my boss talk over me in a meeting without saying anything. I know I have choices, and I am making those choices consciously, rather than, oh, I just have to take it because it's my boss.
Hmm. So I would probably be one that said, "Oh, I just have to take it because you're my boss," and then brought up my point later. So how would you address that right then and there without causing that, "You just disrespected me" feeling?
Well, I think a huge piece of it is, no, obviously knowing your relationship with your boss, knowing how far, because it's not like you just met this person yesterday. If you just met him yesterday, you probably do need to just be quiet and get the lay of the land, and then say to yourself when you go back to your desk, okay, I didn't like the way that felt. I don't want this to be the way that our relationship starts off, because a lot of the treatment that we get is because we allow it. And again, if you choose to allow it because I really need this job, then more power to you. You're making a conscious choice. You know you could do otherwise, but you don't want to take that risk, and that's okay. But I think sometimes going back to your desk and saying, what am I doing with our working relationship if I don't at least try to explore this with this person? And there's a couple of ways you could handle it. One of the things that I would do if I establish, well, I'll give you a real life example. I gave a presentation for a new boss. It was a big government agency, and they asked me to do this sample presentation, so I gave it, and I'm a professional speaker by trade, and so I thought it was pretty good. And the head honcho said at the end of my presentation, "I think that was the biggest piece of shit that I've ever seen in my life." And so, of course, number one, I was shocked, but I've learned, and it comes with practice, thinking on your feet. Um, I was shocked. And then I said, okay, I have a decision to make, because this is going to be the establishment of this relationship. And I tend to use humor to reassert myself in situations like that. So I turned and I looked at my slides and I said, well, since I don't see any actual fecal matter on my slides, could you give me some specific feedback of what you mean by that? And when you do things like that, you're not outwardly challenging them. You're not saying, "You can't talk to me like that, and I don't have to put up with this garbage." But you are basically saying what you're basically saying is, "Your communication wasn't clear, and I truly wanna understand you, and so the only way I can do that is if you can elaborate on what you meant." And a person who is used to taking that aggressive, like, little attack,
Mhm.
they don't know how to respond to that other than fairly directly because you weren't disrespectful. You didn't, have a temper tantrum. You didn't tell them what to do. You asked for clarification. So they really don't have much choice other than to clarify. And once she did, I said, "Oh, well, I totally understand. I was missing this piece, missing this piece. I will put those in. And if we want to do another dry run, let's get at it in 30 minutes or whenever's convenient for you." And I stood with my head held high. I tried not to stutter and stumble over myself because I was a little caught off guard. And it was interesting that as our relationship and it went on for 7 years, I worked for this person in various, forms and fashion. When you're listening to this, you know this person, and you know how people act around this person. You see them around the conference table looking scared, their eyes are darting everywhere. That person knows who's gonna stand up and who's gonna put up. And if you're one of the ones that's gonna put up, then you might be on the receiving end of that behavior more often. The people who stand up tend to get skipped over with that behavior and so you can create a better communication relationship by just standing up even in that subtle way with that example that I gave.
I really like the way you approached it was very soft. I'm not going to challenge you. I'm just going to request because the people who are going to approach it that way are definitely kind of like the challenge. They just enjoy it. So I'm going to push you down into your spot. But
Exactly.
it's like you approached it as okay, what would you like to see different? Because I would love to be of a benefit, however you state it. And you got the feedback you wanted and you were able to make those adjustments. And so many of us, if we just went, oh, well, okay, I give up, done, you never will hit it and you will always feel like you're just the shit.
Yeah.
But it's cool that she was able to
Yep.
give you
Yeah.
those points and you were able to improve on it.
Right.
And that's cool. And then have a great relationship with them after
Yeah.
that. I've had some bosses where we didn't work well for a year or two. And then you finally go, this isn't working. And that one moment, how come I didn't say that 2 years ago? Because all of a sudden it just changes when they know you're you you have your boundary, they actually respect it. You know,
Yeah.
well,
And they
most
may
of them do.
Yeah, well, and you're right, and they may not right away. So to me, assertion like this is a progression in many instances. It's not gonna necessarily be, "Oh, I stood up and I said that one thing, used a little humor, and never did I have that problem again." Some people, it will adjust your relationship immediately. Other people, you have to keep at it, and other people, you have to say, "Okay, I mentioned it in this way, and I didn't, I got a reaction, but then she did it again to me at the next meeting. So now it's times 2." Okay. And so am I going to be a little firmer maybe the second time? Or I'm a big proponent of, and you had mentioned this, of having that one on one conversation after the fact, because sometimes we really need time to think about what am I going to say? And even more important, it might probably a big piece of advice that I would give you is think about what you're going to say, but don't stop there. Think about what you're going to say, think about how they're likely to respond, and then how are you gonna respond to that? Because if you go in and you're like, "I didn't appreciate how you spoke to me in that meeting, and you did the same thing to me when you called my presentation shit, and so now this is the second time," and they say, "Yeah, what are you gonna do about it?" I mean, hopefully nobody would be that bold, but if you got nothing, like I have no response to that, you're stuck. You're dead in the water right there. And so you have to say, how is this person likely to respond when I confront them? And I don't think confrontation is a bad thing. Confrontation just means bringing it out in the open to your attention. So in an assertive but direct and firm way, I'm going to say on Tuesday when I gave my presentation, you mentioned that it was shit. I didn't really appreciate the word choice, but I do appreciate that after I asked you to clarify, you gave me some great specific feedback. So I basically have told you, here's what I didn't like, but you're a great person because you did this other part. And I thought that that probably would help us get off on a better foot. But today in the meeting, you did XYZ. And so I'm concerned about our relationship moving forward and us communicating more effectively. What can we do to make that happen? And
Well,
just open the door to that conversation.
and a lot of the overly assertive people are the ones that would not take it well if you were to bark back. Like if you were to say anything like, hey, you just did it again in front of other people, that doesn't sit well. So I like how you took it offline and went back afterwards and did the approach when you weren't questioning their authority. And even though you weren't questioning authority, that would be how it would be taken.
Right. And what you're creating in that and I don't remember where I got this term from. It was when I was in school, but a professor had mentioned that in situations like that, the person that you're confronting, it's an emotional open zipper. So you know how you feel like if somebody was to come up to you and say, "Oh, I hate to bring this up, but you've got something in your teeth, or your zipper is open, or your shirt's on." That happened to me in the grocery store one time. I was wearing a t-shirt backwards. It's like, and it's embarrassing. And it's more embarrassing if they did it in front of 50 other people. So you're basically creating this defensive position if you confront. And I'm not saying you should never confront publicly. Sometimes you have no other option but to do that. But you have to be strategic in how you do it. But yes, if you by taking it offline, you're not embarrassing me in front of 15 other people. You're allowing me to have that time to have a moment if I need to. And sometimes you can soften the blow by just saying something like, "Hey, I wanted to talk to you about something that's been really uncomfortable for me, and it's probably going to be uncomfortable for you to hear it, but it's so important, I think, to our working relationship that I want to share it with you. Is that okay?" Most people are not going to say no. And once they say, "Okay," or "Yes, I wanna hear it," they've opened the door for you to share it. And they kinda can't slam it in your face right away afterwards. But if you just go in storming in somebody's office and say, "You can't talk to me like that," or "You hurt my feeling," and you just kinda go off, then you're putting them in a defensive position, and they're gonna probably do exactly what you think, get defensive.
Um, I really like what we're talking about. I want to take a quick break, get a word from our sponsor. When I come back, I want to talk about, not just the verbal part, but how our bodies react. So we'll be right back. Hey, since I rarely have openings in my coaching schedule, I have a new resource out there on my website. It is called the BFF Coaching Network. And I have offered a spot there for any coach that has been on the show to list their coaching. You can go out there, you can listen to their episodes, you can feel a little bit about them, and then choose a coach that will work for you. So LauraJaneLayton.com, the BFF Coaching Network. Okay, so Amy, you're sitting there telling this story and everything's great. But I remember a time when someone was so angry and I'm standing there and I was shaking, just fearful of the conversation and how to approach it and the deep breaths and trying to stay calm and not like run and hide. Like I am literally shaking and go, God, I wonder if they can tell. And I'm trying to keep that unquivery voice from being frustrated. And those are, maybe I sheep off too much because it was a really hard thing to do, but I was able to stay through it. But I felt like it was obvious that I was a big chicken.
I would say that public speaking for many, many years, and I'll be perfectly honest, I used to be terrified of public speaking. I don't know how I ended up doing it for a living, but all eyes on me, and I would stutter and stumble over my words. And, it's definitely I wouldn't say even an acquired skill because you have to acquire it, but it's a skill that you need to develop over time. But what I have noticed is in all the years that I taught college public speaking, students would come back from the lectern and say, "Oh my gosh, I was so nervous. My voice was shaking. I was sweating. My face was red. I felt like I was talking 100 miles an hour." And 9 times out of 10, even I, who am tuned in to look for that, did not see all of that. We feel a lot more than what people see. And so I think telling ourselves that is, to realize that many of the things that the little voice in our head that says, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to me. Oh my gosh, I'm going to sound like an idiot. Oh my gosh, I need to answer this question quickly, but I'm sitting here like deer in the headlights." You're creating it into a much bigger scene than it is to the other person on the receiving end. Now, if you open your mouth and you say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. Oh, I don't know," don't enunciate it. Just keep that inside and just move forward. And I think if you feel like you can't, it's a perfectly acceptable thing. And this is my kind of catch-all catchphrase that I will tell all of my friends. If you are truly dumbfounded and don't know how to respond, simply saying, "Thank you for letting me know," or "Thank you for bringing that to my attention." Use your own language. "I'd like some time to think about it. Can I get back to you?" And don't just say, "Can I get back to you?" But say, "Can I get back to you later this afternoon?" Or "Can we talk about this in the morning after I've had some time to process what you've said?" And that allows you to buy some time to cool off, to process what they've said. And so that can be another way. And just because another person has decided that it is a good time for them to have this confrontation or to have this conversation or to give you some feedback doesn't mean that it's necessarily a good time for you to receive it. And you don't have to. You do want to listen so that you know what you're processing and going to go back to them at, but you don't have to respond immediately. It's okay to take some time to process it. And I think people will appreciate that you're not just giving a knee-jerk reaction to what they've shared, that you're going to truly, go home or go back to your desk and contemplate it and think about it for a while.
When you approached your one boss with the shit presentation, you you were able to do it immediately. Um, was that something you had learned with that boss over time, or was this the first one? So did you know her well enough? So it was.
No, but I will say, and that was 3 days into my employ with this person. On day 1 when I got there, if you're paying attention, you can pick up on a lot of things from people. I mean, even just looking at the things they have in their offices, their artifacts, for lack of a better term, can tell you a lot about what's important to them. Are there 15 family photos on the wall or 15 degrees and certificates? It gives you an idea of their focus. And this particular person, on day 1 in meeting me, she got right up in my face and she said, "I hope you're ready to work because the last person didn't work out at all and we had to can his ass. And so you better be ready to hit the ground running." I was like, "And howdy do to you, ma'am." I mean, it was just, so I knew. I knew that was her MO, for lack of a better term, of this very, I'm trying to convey power. And without divulging too much about the client, I will say that she was a high achieving woman in a very male dominated organization. And so I'm sure she had to literally fight her way to be heard, to be respected, to be feared, to make her way up in this organization. But once you got past that, she was a lot more multifaceted than she seemed at first glance. And sometimes you have to give people a little bit of grace that they don't know any better than you know any better. Maybe they didn't have the benefit of having great communication skills taught to them. So they're fighting their way through life the way that they've learned works. And that's the only reason we persist in any behavior. If keeping my mouth shut and being a doormat works and it's gotten me this far, it's very easy to convince yourself that this is the way to go. And it's the same thing with being very aggressive. Hey, I've punched my way to the top. It's just when you can take a step back and say, but is there a better way where I could have done that, getting my needs met or helping meet the needs of others? That's where the beauty of assertion, I think, comes into play.
So how, as somebody in the corporate environment who's already gained some respect, you're there, you're communicating. How do we make sure I had a boss that called it kind, friendly, and firm.
Hmm.
And so she's just like, that was her motto, as I'm going to be kind and I'm going to be friendly, but I'm not going to be pushed around.
Hmm.
What is something that we could do right now that could help us move into more of a I'm going to call it a command presence, if that's the only word I can come up with. But
Sure.
just being looking more assured. I mean, we all have a little bit of imposter syndrome. We don't work hard because it's just fun. It's because we feel like we need to. We want to
Mhm.
prove ourselves constantly. And I want to be better. And we go to classes to learn. So, what is that? How can I just switch my communication to make it feel natural yet firm? I guess is the word I'm coming up with.
Sure. I think planning for conversations as much as you can in advance. Don't just wing it when you say, "Okay, I'm going to go in and be assertive." Like have a little bit of a strategy. I think as far as that, the kindness is. I'm a very direct person, and I am very like my husband used to pull his glasses down when I would give him some type of feedback, and we were married. We were married for 33 years. He'd say, "I bet you don't teach those I bet you don't teach that in your communication classes." Like, okay, sorry, I didn't use my best communication, but if so, this is what I want to say, and sometimes even writing it out. This is what I want to say. I hate it when you interrupt me in meetings. Okay, now I look at those words and say, okay, is there a word that's just as clear but doesn't use the word hate? You know, is can I say I feel frustrated when you interrupt me in a meeting, and it's maybe less accusatory in that way because I'm just sharing how I feel about behavior that you truly exhibited. I think also another element of the language choice is, again, adjusting your words and making them as clear as possible, making them as kind as possible, but providing specific examples. I think, telling somebody, you're not being a team player. Okay, we're not on a baseball team, so I have no idea what that means. And even if I agree with you, I have no idea how to fix it. So if you give feedback and you say, 3 times this week, on Monday, you were 10 minutes late, on Wednesday, you were almost 20 minutes late, and today you were 5 minutes late to the team meeting. It's harder for somebody to get defensive and react to that because it's a fact. So anytime you're giving that type of feedback, sticking to the facts rather than labeling the facts or putting your interpretation of the facts, you're lazy, you don't care, you're not a team player, all of that language is not good to use because it is so up to interpretation. And then I think the nonverbal element is, using of course, nonverbal is very tied to culture. So it depends on where you are in the world when you are having these conversations and the culture of the other person you definitely would want to take into consideration. But, in North America in general, it is, looking that person in the eye and making eye contact when you're communicating these messages that says, if I'm looking down and I'm kind of saying, well, Laura, I really need you to and I'm just kind of stumbling over myself and I'm avoiding eye contact and I'm wringing my hands, that's not gonna come across as much like you really mean what you're saying as if you sit still, you look the person in the eye, and you say it firmly, which might require some practice in advance. Having that conversation with a friend or a trusted colleague, assuming they're not in your chain of command, for lack of a better term. I don't want to ever encourage gossip, like, "I'm gonna talk about this other person with you," but sometimes it's good to, can I practice this conversation with somebody and let them play that other person so I can navigate my way through it? So, the nonverbal and the verbal have to go together and send that same message. If I've chosen kind words, but words that say, "I truly mean it, and I'm giving you some concrete things to fix," and now I've got body language and facial expressions that say, "No, no, I'm not kidding. I really mean it. But I'm kind and caring about it." I don't have to flail my arms and scream and yell because the message will become super clear because it's completely aligned. It's when you send mixed messages, like telling somebody, "It's not a big deal. I don't care. I don't really care about that." But everything about you just says you're annoyed and you're upset, so you probably do care about it. Or going to the other extreme and being like, "That's okay. It's not a big deal. It doesn't matter if you use me as a doormat." It's like, well, does it or doesn't it? Because you're saying those words that say that maybe it matters, and you're bringing it up, but everything else about you says it doesn't matter. You're confusing me. So you want to align those messages so the message is quite clear.
So posture and eye contact are the two that I think make the biggest difference. Is there something else?
I think the hesitation in the speech, if you really, if you are somebody that struggles to say difficult things, that practice, the more you do it, the better off. Because if you could try to be here on time, maybe it's just not going to be as effective. So practicing those uncomfortable conversations, and I think the caring part can come into play too by just a lean in your posture. Rather than sitting back in your chair with your arms crossed and say, "Look, you need to," or pointing your finger, to sit forward in a relaxed posture and say, I this is something that's really important to me and I want you to be successful. And these were 3 times when you were late and it's impacting your success and the team's success. And my face looks sincere. It's not like I'm berating you, but I'm leaning in, I'm talking to you. I've got a face that says I mean it, but it's not an angry face. I'm looking out for you. And that's, to me, that's the whole point of being assertive, is when you say, "Hey, I have value and you have equal value, and we're going to have a conversation that hopefully helps us achieve both of our goals and needs, and that's all I'm here to do." Versus, "Oh gosh, I've got to go have this." Supervisors oftentimes struggle when they're giving negative feedback to their employees, because it's like, "Oh, I've got to go give this constructive criticism, or I've got to go criticize this person or give them bad feedback." Don't think about it as bad feedback. Change that dialogue in your head, because it's not bad feedback. It is important, concrete, specific information that you are providing them that is going to help them be more successful. That should be something you are looking forward to giving, not dreading giving. And that's why I like to use the term performance improvement feedback. And that's a phrase that I coined, rather than I'm going to give constructive criticism or I'm going to give negative feedback. Because to me, performance improvement feedback has to be positive. It's information I'm giving you to do better, do smarter, do less stress, do your job less stressfully, whatever it might be, because I care enough about you to let you know this stuff so that you can succeed. So I should be looking forward to giving that. And what ends up happening is it creates a body language and a tone and an approach that says, "Oh, this person really cares, and this is something that I should receive." When I read from my supervisor that they're dreading giving me the feedback, or "Oh, here we go with the annual performance appraisal. Here's all the things you did wrong." I'm not going to receive it in a positive way.
One of the things that I was taught was that sandwich method on communication is start out kind, give the feedback, and then, the positive, positive, negative, positive, to make sure they know that you're not attacking them as a person, but you're approaching a behavior that needs to be changed. Um, I know that there's several of my colleagues that learned that, but that's probably because I worked with them. I don't know how broad that type of feedback is. So, what do you think about that method? Is it taking away from the constructive part?
No, I think when it's done well, it's a good technique. I think the problem is that most of the time that I have received the sandwich has had bread, poop, and bread. It's like a shit sandwich, right? So it's like, "Hey, Laura Jane, I really like you, but you've done a terrible job on these 15 things, and now I'm going to spend you 30 minutes berating you on those, and at the end I'm going to say, so keep up the good work." It can't be that. It can't be that. So, but if, when I give feedback, it's usually gonna be in a particular area. Like, going back to my example, if you're a supervisor and you have an employee who has traditionally been on time and ready to go for meetings and for work, and suddenly over the last couple of weeks, things have gone down the toilet and they're showing up late to things. First thing would be that don't let it happen 10 times or even 3 times before you address it in some form or fashion. But the sandwich in that environment would be, let's call the person Susan. So, "Hey Susan, I wanted to talk to you because normally you're my most prompt person. I mean, you're the first one at the meeting, you're the first one through the door in the morning, and I really appreciate your promptness or your time management," or whatever you're going to say, like giving them some specific examples. And then you pause. Don't say the word "but." "However, Because anytime you use the word but, everybody knows something bad is going to come after the but. Or something 180 degrees different than what has just come, if nothing else. And so I give the positive feedback for the past behavior, and then I pause. And then I say, I'm concerned because over the last week, that has changed. On Monday, when we had staff meeting at 9 o'clock, you came in at about 9:10. And I probably should have said something then, but I didn't want to jump all over some issue that was a non issue. But it's happened 2 times since then. We've had this thing, and I'm concerned about you. What's going on? Or how are you doing? Something to put the ball, like, here's what I've noticed. And I'm bringing it to your attention because I care about you, because it's not normal based on your great performance before. Now I'm putting the ball in your court to provide me some type of explanation. And then you have to kind of proceed from there. Um, the one thing I would caution people to be careful about is when the person says, "Oh, well, I'm having some issues with XYZ," and they've got an excuse or an explanation. You can call it what you want. Realize that an excuse or an explanation is not necessarily an okay answer. Like, it may be the truth, but the bottom line is, after that explanation, you may need to still go back and say, "I'm so sorry that that's going on in your personal life, and I really hope that works out. I'm in a difficult situation here as well because I need everyone to be at the meetings on time or to work on time. What can you do differently tomorrow to make that happen?" Because you can't just let people not do their jobs. Now, could you say, if Susan's grandmother is in the hospital and she's getting out at the end of the week, it's like, "Hey, we'll cover for you for the rest of the week." You adapt based on what you hear coming from the person, but be cautious not to just with whatever comes back at you, to just say, "Okay, well, you know, just try harder." You really want to, if it's an ongoing problem, you want to come out of that conversation with a specific strategy, and that's where your real assertion comes in. You're gonna assert and kind of push for, what are you gonna do differently starting tomorrow or starting at the end of the week or whatever it might be? Because if they could have fixed it, they would have done it already. And so the fact that they didn't means either they don't know how and they need your guidance, or they have not taken the time to sit back and say, "I need to fix this problem if I want to keep my job. What am I going to do?" And you're helping them to do that by having that conversation.
Everything that you're talking about is like, oh, this would be so cool. It would be cool to say, "Hey, Amy, I have a call. I have a thing coming up. Will you
You can
listen
call
to
me.
this?" And like, how does this sound? Does this sound too sheepish? Does this sound too bitchy? Or is this just a good balance? And, have that sounding board. Because sometimes it's just that neutral person that that people are all going to react differently or
Right.
respond differently. So thankfully, a lot of people respond instead of react.
Right. Well,
So
and assertiveness is, that's culturally bound too, because it's behavior oriented. And so, like, I've had clients, and I live in Texas, that I have said, "Look, if you were living I'm from New York originally. I said, if you were living in New York, you'd be fine. But that doesn't fly down here. You can't be that very borderline aggressive." And so it's knowing your work environment, it's knowing your cultural environment. And even when you've done it all right, sometimes, no matter how right I've done it, and no matter how perfect, like, you could send me a script and I say, "Oh, that's exactly what you should have said." And you act it out for me. And I say, "Yes, your body language and your tone was perfect for that." That doesn't mean that the other person is necessarily not going to receive it that well. Because if they're not used to somebody being assertive and confronting them about their behavior, they're going to, it's going to ouch a little bit at first. And that's okay. It's okay. And especially if you're changing, like, I used to be a doormat, and now I'm suddenly going to be super assertive. People are gonna be like, "What?" I mean, they're gonna look like Lassie with the head cock, like, "What's
like,
happening
what'd you
here?
just say?
What'd you say to me?" Yeah, and so you have to, you might have to get used to that little awkward transition. And as a leader, one of the things that I have, recommended people do is, and you can blame Amy Castro. Say, "I went to Amy Castro. I listened to this podcast the other day, and it was all about assertive. And I realized I've been doing myself and you a disservice by not communicating some of the things that I should have communicated. So over the next week, I'm going to be working on this. Can you help me? And ask them, let me know how it felt receiving that. Could I have said that in a better way? I mean, you'd be shocked how people are willing to help you improve because it's going to improve everything about your working relationship. And oh, by the way, all of this stuff translates to your personal relationships too. It's like assertion is assertion. You need it in all facets of your life, or at least have the option, have the tool in your toolbox.
Yeah, and the recovery one, because sometimes we do react.
Yes.
And you just got that button pushed and you just went berserk and you have to breathe and recover. It might be 3 days later, but I always have to think through, okay, I have got to I was incorrect in how I delivered. I
Mhm.
need to set it right. And so I do my recovery thought process and like, okay, this is why I responded, not you made me respond, but I felt this way.
Mhm.
I responded, and I want you to know you don't deserve that. It's like
Nice.
it's always like, oh, I remember when one of my kids was, you get that really just fight, 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 and you're just both getting worse and worse and worse. And I
Mhm.
remember turning around, sitting down and hugging him and going, no matter how bad you behave, you do not deserve the way I just treated you. I
Mm.
love you. And just held him. And I says, we don't need to fight.
Yeah.
And
Ye
you can do an immediate recovery or you can wait a couple days, but nobody deserves to be belittled or nothing you can do is makes everything worthless. It's
Yes.
not death. It's you're going to keep going on and knowing that you can recover to me is the first step because we don't always catch our triggers. But if
Yes.
we can learn to start noticing where we're going to start being that bitch, we can start tuning it down and planning and everything that you've said, like know your audience, know your culture, know the people, plan the response and how you're going to deliver it so that they receive it because we deliver to the receiver.
Mm.
It's everybody's different. And so how do I deliver that when I'm going to talk to Amy? How do I deliver it when I'm going to talk to, I think we called her Susan?
Yes, Susan.
So, yeah, so it's planning, it's preparing, and I love everything that you've said. Would you like to kind of summarize it, step 1, 2, 3, and then tell us how to get a hold of you, what you do? Because, like, I love to use you as a sounding board. I think this is a cool idea.
Oh, great, great. So, as far as, like how to start making this happen, I think the first thing would be starting with some self-assessment, knowing, you might know if you fall in that passive side of things, the aggressive side of things. Very few people fall in the assertive because, again, those are much more acquired skills. There are assessments that you can take. One of my personal favorites is the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument. It's an old instrument, but it's very accurate in helping find out where you fall on that assertiveness scale. And even though it's labeled conflict, but that's usually what it is. You're either trying to avoid it or you're creating it. So it's a good tool to figure out where you are. So that would be one thing, and start with yourself. And then I think picking a scenario, like I will usually, tell a friend, don't try this out on the most difficult person in your life to start off with. Okay. If you're testing your assertiveness wings and they're still damp and still drying out, like a little butterfly that's come from the cocoon, don't go to that most aggressive person in your life or the person where you have the most risk of failure if you screw it up and start with that person. Start with little things like it could simply be asking a question, like the example that I gave about our friend Susan or our employee Susan. I don't think that the first time Susan is late that you should sit Susan down and have this discussion about promptness and what they're gonna do to be on time. It was one time, and it's been in 10 years. You're not gonna do that. At the same time, I don't think you should ignore it either because ignoring it basically says you don't care. Like, if Susan had had a fender bender, and messed up her car on the way here and had to take an Uber, and she shows up late knowing full well she's always on time and you say nothing, you basically say you don't care about her by doing that. So what I would do is I would probably just start off with something simple, a question. Hi, Susan, I'm so glad you're here. I was worried about you because you're never usually late. And just acknowledge it, just notice it. And that's an easy first step because you're not judging it, you're not critiquing it, you're not correcting her. You're just acknowledging and showing caring. And whatever answer she gives, fine, let it fly. And what I have learned is if Susan just happened to hit the snooze alarm one too many times that morning and was kind of on the beginning of this downward trend, she's going to realize very quickly, oh, wow, everybody does really notice that I'm the person that's here on time. And it is going to impact people if I show up late. So I need to do better. And you might catch that person before they get too far down a path of unsuccessful behavior. Let's put it that way. So start with little things like just asking a question about something just to get the issue out there and see how people respond. And then I think asking for feedback from people. I think it's, you gave a beautiful example of taking responsibility for your mistakes and, with talking to your child or with a coworker, whoever it might be. And it's okay to say, hey, I'm not a perfect person. I'm trying to be a better leader. I'm trying to be a better colleague. I'm trying to be a better significant other. And can you help me by noticing these things? Giving me feedback when I ask for it, being honest with me if you don't like the way that I say something. And, that just taking those first 3 steps are going to be huge in going in the right direction.
That's a lot.
I know. Okay. Just start with the first one then.
We don't do succinct. No, this is beautiful. And I wasn't making fun of you. It's just like, yes, these are
I just have
all
so much I want you to
important
have.
things.
I want to give you
Yes.
all these tools.
But I really like the start reflecting. That personal reflection is really that first step. What is it that I could do better at? And did I come in as a doormat or did I come in as the lion trapped in the corner? How did I respond? And I like that as that first. And so let's close out. I think we didn't talk about how to get hold of you. And if you did, I was so involved in all the other things I forgot. So did our listener.
Well, the best place to get a hold of me would be through my website, which is pretty simple. It's amycastro.com. And all of my information about me is on there, the things that I do when I'm working with people. And there's also a lot of resources on there. You can get access to that Thomas Kilmann. I've got a book. I mean, there's other things there that can help you on this journey because it is a journey. It's not. I've been. Like I mentioned, I learned some of these skills in graduate school. So I was probably 24 at the time. And
Oh, yesterday.
it was yesterday. Now I'm like, let's put it this way. I'm at least twice that old, and that's pretty fair. And maybe then some. And I'm still, and that's why I love having conversations like this because it reminds me, Amy, you could be doing better. You could be trying harder. You could be just having a greater and more positive impact on others if you made some changes. And so it's an ongoing process. It's not an overnight thing.
Absolutely. And it's baby steps and just keep moving forward and assess your day and choose how you want it to be tomorrow. And it might not be that way, but at least you chose and
That's
you
right.
worked towards it. So thank you so much for joining us. Friend Amy and I are not medical or mental licensed professionals. We're here for entertainment. People would love to see your path a little smoother to help you reach your goals sooner. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Are you tired of waking up exhausted? You are not alone. If you're looking to take your life back, let's start with the simple step of adjusting your self-talk. Stay tuned for the next episode with your host, Lara Jane. Remember to follow the show so you don't miss the next simple step that you can use to feel more confident. And please leave an honest review.